Hi, and welcome back to the Cluttered Workbench. Today we're going to talk about solder. And I know a lot of you are new to electronics. One of the most important things you can learn how to do is to solder your kits. But the most important thing you ever need is a good quality solder. You get kits and it has this no-name brand solder like this. You have no idea what it is. Lead-free is a lot harder to work with than say a 60-40 tin lead blend or a 6337, which is a eutectic solder. Eutectic means that it solidifies and melts at the exact same temperature. A 6337 will melt at 183 degrees centigrade or Celsius, and a 60-40 has about a 5 degrees Celsius window between it melting and solidifying, and it makes it a lot easier to do basic joints or wires because it cools and solidifies very quickly after you take the heat off. A lot of these cheap Chinese kits come with lead-free. Lead-free is a bear to work with unless you're experienced with soldering. The other problem with lead-free is it develops what they call whiskers. And if you've ever been in a third grade science class where you put a piece of string on a mason jar and you fill the jar with sugar and water and you watch the crystals grow up the string, well, that's what tin whiskers are, and they can create a lot of problems. But because politicians got involved, lead-based solder is prohibited in manufacture of consumer goods. Now there are certain areas where lead-based solder is still acceptable, and that's mainly for NASA and their Mars missions and things like that, where you want a good quality joint. Lead has its advantages. Yes, it's hazardous to the environment, but lead is 100% recyclable. So if you go, for example, a car battery, yours dies, you go to AutoZone, you hand off the battery, they give you a new one. That old battery will go back to a recycling plant. Well, they'll take those lead plates out of that battery, melt them back down, voila, it's completely renewable. But yes, it is harmful to the environment, and you get lead into the trash and the landfills, and there's a lot of problems there. But in electronics, ever since I think it was 2006 when they decided to get rid of lead-based solder in their production, a lot of electronics components after a couple of years quit because that tin grows those whiskers, and guess what? It shorts out other components. And that's not bullshit, it's reality. But I'm going to talk about, if you want to get started in electronics and you want to use a good quality solder, I recommend staying with some name brands. At least here in the United States you have Kester. And let me zoom in a little bit on that. Oh, come on. This is a 6337, 3.3% flux, core 44. Kester 44 has been around forever. Excuse me, had to burp. This is a .020, which is great for surface mount and also through-hole component. Kester's been an industry leader. They're used in ISO labs. You'll see here it has a date of manufacture, the DOM, August 2020, third day. The warranty expires August 3rd, 2023. Kester and Alpha only guarantee or warranty for 3 years. But after the 3 years, guess what? This stuff still works. It can work 40 years later and it's still perfectly fine. You can also buy MG Chemicals. One I use a lot. It's an RA flux, which is rosin activated, one of the more aggressive fluxes. It's a .032, 22 gauge, and it has 2.2% flux. The Kester 44 is 3.3% flux, so it's got a little bit more flux behind it. If you watch Dave Jones, the EEV blog, he loves multi-core. This is Loctite. That's sold in the United States, but it is multi-core across the oceans. This is 0.9 millimeters, which is a little bit bigger. It's about a 0.035. Works very well. I do some surface mount soldering, and this is Chip Quick. 0.015. It's 100 grams. It's a no clean water washable flux. So flux is very important with soldering. It's a 2.2%, 0.015. Now this is 62% tin, 36% lead, 2% silver. This is good for like mobile radios where the components are actually mounted upside down in a CB. You want a little more tensile strength. Or if you're working on ceramic circuit boards, you want the silver content, because on a lot of those ceramic circuit boards they're using silver traces, and it'll just suck the silver right to your tip, and you want to use a silver based. Reason I'm wearing gloves is, yes, a lot of the solder has lead based in it. When you melt the solder, the fumes coming off of that is not lead. Lead doesn't boil until like 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But the flux will boil off. That's the smoke you see when you're soldering. But again, when you got lead, it's easier just to wear a pair of gloves. That way when you're done, you don't have to sit there and scrub your hands and get the lead residue off before you eat or drink, because lead is a known hazardous substance, as much as I love it. A lot of times I'm working on CB radios and replacing the capacitors and stuff, and I'll use, again, a 62% tin, 36% lead, 2% silver, AG. This is from Radio Shack. Yes, Radio Shack is still alive. They have a small online store right now. And this is a .022. If you're working on through-hole stuff, you want a .028 to a .032 diameter solder, because it'll just fill in the pads and the legs. If you're working on surface mount components, you want to use something smaller, like a .020 or a .015 for the really small SMDs, like 0402s. I don't do a whole lot of surface mount work, and I've kind of gone to the paste flux, or god damn it, the solder paste. That's what I'm looking for. Solder paste, and you use a hot air gun and it just reflows in. But a lot of times I do use a very thin 6040 or 6337. I'm more of a convert now with the 6337 because it is Eutectic. So as soon as you heat up the pad, flow in the solder, pull off the solder, remove the iron, it solidifies instantly. But if you're not sure what you really want to have, you can buy these little pocket packs. This is one I found at Home Depot or a big box store. You really don't want this stuff. Electrical solder. Silver bearing rosin core solder. Number one, it's very thick. It is a 0.040 or 1 millimeter diameter. I don't know if it's tin based, like lead free, or is it a lead based solder? But we're going to test it out here in a few minutes. A lot of times you go to a big box store, you don't want to use that solder for your projects because it's either electrical solder or plumbing solder. Plumbing solder, no, 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 no. Plumbing solder has an acid-based flux. So if you're doing electronics and you flow that in, that acid-based flux is just going to eat away your paths, your leads, your circuit traces, everything. So avoid that. Go onto Amazon, or here in the United States you can use DigiKey or Mauser and pick a good electrical solder. Amazon, you can pick Castor or MG Chemicals or AIM, any of the major brands. Here's another one that I found. It was actually at a big box store when I was doing electronic EVT stuff, which is emergency vehicle technician. This is made by Alpha. It's a 60-40, 60% tin, 40% lead. It's a little thicker. It's a 0.050, which is a little over a millimeter. Works great for doing wirings like 10 gauge, 12 gauge wire. Just solder them together. Perfect. Some kits will come with this crap. LF99 lead-free solder. Problem with lead-free is, number one, you need to have a hotter soldering iron tip instead of normally 350 degrees Celsius. You're going to have to bump it up to about 400. And the whole rule of thumb with doing a kit and you're putting the leads in and you're soldering, you want to be in and out in about 2 seconds. Because a lot of the components are heat sensitive, like transistors, MOSFETs, integrated circuits, things like that. This is actually not too bad. It's a 99.3% tin, 0.7% copper, and it has a rosin core. I did buy a soldering iron that came with this shit. I have no idea what it is. There's no label. Another soldering iron came with this. Just like it is, no holder. This is lead free. This stuff is crap. And then when I did my placebo multimeter soldering kit I did about 2 weeks ago, this is what came with it. I don't know if it's leaded or lead free. We're going to test that out. If you're not sure what kind of solder you want, you can go on to Amazon and you can buy, this is a Kester pocket pack. It's about half an ounce of solder. It's roughly about 30 feet long. And it is a 60% tin, 49 or 40% lead, 0.031 diameter with Kester 44 flux. Kester 44 flux is 3.3%. It's very good. If you want to use lead free, I recommend going to a big boy like Kester. This is an LD100 lead free solder. The LD100 is almost Eutectic, like the 6337. It just solidifies very quickly after you take the heat off. But this is 96.5% tin, 3% silver, and 0.5% copper. Again, 0.031, great for through-hole components. But what I want to do now is I'm going to bring up my unplated, oxidized piece of strip board copper. And let me zoom my camera out a little bit. Come on, camera, behave. This is just bare PC board copper. It's not plated in any way, and we're going to test out a few of these solders to see how well they perform. A good 60-40 or 63-37 solder is going to give you a nice, lovely, shiny joint. That's what you want. Tin-based solder or lead-free will give you a matte or kind of a crusty finish. And that's just the way it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try this electrical solder, silver bearing, from big box store. And let's see what it does. Now I haven't polished off the oxidation, so it'll give us a good test on the flux to see how well it bonds. So I'm going to heat up the ooh, that's gross. That is not very shiny. That is definitely lead free. I'm going to clean off my iron tip. Sorry for the camera bump. And let's zoom in on it. Sorry, my camera doesn't have a remote. But here you can see it's peaky and it's a bit crusty. Where is my spudger? There it is. There's a little bit of flux here. That's fine. But you can see it's not real shiny. It's matte, finished, kind of looks like an olive drab, something you'd find in the military. But that's the solder based or silver based solder from a big box store, and that's most likely lead free. Now I'm going to try this, which is a known lead free solder. It came from an Elenco project kit, and we'll see how this behaves. We're going to do that right here. Not bad. It's fairly shiny. It has a decent amount of flux in it. That's looking all right. Bear with me, I'm trying to maneuver my soldering iron around. Oops, wrong way. But you can see that's fairly shiny. But it has decent amount of flux, but it's still kind of matte. So let's try this. This is no brand. I don't know what the hell it is, if it's lead based or not. We're gonna feed some here on this pad. It's got a good amount of flux in it. That's fairly shiny, so I think that is a lead based solder. And of course I am cleaning my iron tip off after every joint. That's fairly shiny. That will be okay. This is the solder that came with the placebo kit I reviewed a couple weeks ago. No idea what it is. Let's see. I'll put this down here. It's not too bad. It's definitely lead free though, because you can see it's kind of tarnished looking. And I'm going to try, this is the Kester lead free LD100. For somebody using a lead free, my iron's set at 350 degrees centigrade. This may not flow real well, because usually lead free wants a higher temperature. Oh, that's loud. That wants to stick to my iron tip. Try it again. Yeah, see how it clouds over? It's definitely lead free. And I'm not going to worry about that because I know it is lead free. But it's a high quality solder and will do the job if your job requires lead free solder. This is Kester 44, 3.3% flux, 0.031 diameter, 60/40. Let's see how this stuff works. We're going to go right here. Oh, that's nice. It flows real well. Look at that puddle. See how nice and shiny it is? Yeah, buddy. Okay, these are the mystery brands. I'm going to use Radio Shack silver bearing 0.022. It's a little thinner. And I'm going to put it right over here. Pardon the camera bump. Yeah, this is very thin. It feeds in fast. That is a nice shiny joint. This is good stuff. Yes, Radio Shack's still in business. They don't have brick and mortars anymore because they couldn't handle their business. But you can still buy a lot of their stuff online. This is my go-to brand. This is Kester 44, 6337, Eutectic, 3.3% flux. This is a 0.020. It's very thin. Made more for surface mount, but we're going to flow this stuff in and see what it does. Almost immediately solid as soon as you take your iron off. Clean, clean, clean. Keep the experiment good. And now I'm going to move my camera back a little bit. We're going to try one of my favorites. I've been using this stuff for a while too. This is MG Chemicals. Oops. Get it around the right way, Dave. It's an RA flux, 0.03, 22 gauge, 2.2% flux. This is Eutectic solder because it's a 6337. And like Kester, is made in the United States, and me being a patriot, I love my country. I prefer to buy US made products or anything from our neighbors up north in Canada. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's got a rich flux to it. Okay. And last but not least, we will try this Loctite / multi-core. This has an earthen core to 0.9 millimeter, but it is an earthen 362, which I believe is an RMA flux. Means it's rosin mildly activated. And come on, let's try this. That's nice and shiny. It solidifies nice and shiny. Not bad. And I'll just use a little bit of this to wet my soldering iron tip, put it back in the holder, and turn it off. Okay, lessons learned. I prefer to use a good, high quality solder that's locally manufactured. At least I'm from the United States, so I don't pronounce the L in solder, so don't bash me on that. If King George III would have won our battle for independence, we would be pronouncing solder, and we would be part of the crown, and we're not. So don't bash me on that. Here in the United States, we are a melting pot of numerous different languages, and we pronounce solder without the L. Okay, let's this has a very good flux on it. You'll notice that the lead-free here, here, and here all have a crusty appearance. What happens with lead-free over time, though, it'll actually grow what they call whiskers, and it shorts out things. You got a problem. This solder right here, spattered like crazy. Your good high-quality brands of solders are going to have a consistent core of flux through the wire. If you buy the cheap no-name Chinese stuff, you'll notice you'll be soldering away, flow, 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 and then it stops because there's a gap. That's why I don't recommend going on eBay and buying one hung low brand solder. You're just going to have problems with it. Spend a little bit of money and buy a name brand. If you're not sure what you want, go on to Amazon or DigiKey and Dave Johnston at Aggressive Fun, he sells 10-foot rolls of Kester, Alpha, MG Chemicals, little handy packs. And one of those 10-foot rolls will do a couple of projects. But I am a big supporter of Kester because Kester's been around since Jesus was a baby. They make a good high-quality solder. It's used in ISO labs. That's why there's a data manufacturer. And after 2 or 3 years, it expires past its data manufacturer. The ISO labs are required to get rid of it. But like Kester and Alpha have on their website, just because the warranty expires on it, they can't guarantee it past 3 years. That stuff has an indefinite shelf life. A good quality solder will last you, if you're just doing projects here and there, it's still going to work 40 years later. Hopefully that helps. I'm sorry if my format's a little out of, but my whole thing is if you're going to do little through hole component project kits, I love building kits. They're fun and it improves my soldering skills. The only way to get good at soldering is to do soldering. And I'm going to do a test on a little kit like this in my next episode using a good quality 6040 solder. But if you're in doubt, just go online, buy one of these little pocket packs. You know, it's, God, what do they label this as? It's like half an ounce of solder. You don't have to buy a big roll like this MG Chemicals, which is a half a pound, and find out you don't like that. It doesn't flow for you. You're not pleased with it. Buy a couple of the little small packs. They're cheap. Try them out. What works for you works for you. But again, don't go on eBay and buy some one hung low brand, because you might have a lead-free solder and it has crap flux in it and it's going to be hell to work with. So stick with the name brands, you know, Multi-Core, Loctite, MG Chemicals, Kester, AIM, Alpha. The big boys, they have good quality control. It's going to work for just fine for you, but some people like, I prefer using the 6337 because it's more modern. And if you're working on wires or things that are easily disturbed, it melts and solidifies instantly. It's great stuff. But 6040 is just fine. There's like a 5 °C plastic range, and that's between the time it melts and solidifies. There's about a 5 °C range on it. It's not bad. Hopefully this helps, and I'm going to work on a few other projects to show you basics of soldering. Soldering is not hard. It's a feel, and I'll be working on that here right shortly. Thanks, and have a great day. Happy Sunday. Bye-bye.